Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. So, why do we die? I mean, it's pretty much the question, isn't it? It's something we humans have been asking ourselves forever. Well, today, we're going to jump in a time machine and head back thousands of years to look at two really ancient and totally different answers to that very mystery. And our journey is going to put two, let's call them heavyweight worldviews, in the ring. In one corner, you've got the polytheistic myths of the ancient Near East, places like ancient Mesopotamia. And in the other corner, you have the monotheistic story from the Hebrew Old Testament. So, how did these two totally different cultures explain something as huge as mortality? Well, the best place to start is, you guessed it, right at the very beginning, the moment of creation. All right, our first big point of comparison, creation. Was it a bug or a feature? This is a great question, isn't it? When humanity was first created, was death part of the original plan, a feature? Or was it some kind of cosmic mistake, a bug in the system? Okay, so from the ancient Near Eastern perspective, this wasn't even a debate. For them, death was absolutely a feature, not a bug. They believed humans were made mortal right from the get-go. It wasn't an accident. It was all part of the divine plan. Our job was basically to serve the gods, and then, our time was up. And to really get this, we've got to meet one of the key players in their creation stories, the mother goddess Ninhursag. She's also known as Ninmah, and she was a huge figure in the whole Creating Humanity project. Her story, well, it tells us a lot. Okay, so check out this story, the myth of Enki and Ninmah. It lays it all out. First, the younger gods are complaining about all the hard work they have to do. So what happens? The god Enki and our mother goddess Ninmah get together and create humans out of clay to be their servants. Problem solved, right? Well, they decide to celebrate, and after a few drinks, a totally drunk Ninmah starts creating humans with all sorts of flaws and disabilities. But here's the kicker. Enki, instead of getting mad, finds a place in society for every single one of them. The message here is crystal clear. Humanity was created imperfect from the start. Flaws, and by extension mortality, weren't an accident. They were woven into our very fabric. Now, let's flip the coin. The Old Testament view is, well, it's a complete 180. Death as a consequence of human choice. In this story, death was not part of the original blueprint. Not at all. Humanity was actually created with the potential to live forever. And this is really the heart of the difference. As Dr. Lazarus Castang puts it, in Hebrew literature, mortality and death originated with human sinful choice to flout the divine proscription against eating the forbidden fruit. So see, death wasn't baked into the system. It was something that happened because of a human action, a human choice. All right, next up, the flood. Was it about annoyance or justice? This is where that fundamental difference, death by divine design versus death by human choice, gets even clearer. We just have to look at how each tradition talks about the Great Flood. So in those ancient Near Eastern stories, like the famous Atrahasis epic, the whole reason for the flood comes down to a single word, rigmo. It's an Akkadian word, and it basically means noise, clamor, a real din. And yeah, you heard that right. The gods decided to destroy humanity because they were being too loud. I'm not kidding. The clamor of humanity was keeping the gods from getting their sleep. Their solution? Wipe them all out with a flood. I mean, it really paints a picture of these gods as being kind of unpredictable and honestly a little petty, doesn't it? And this is where the contrast just becomes, wow, so stark. In the ancient Near East, the cause of the flood is divine annoyance. Humanity's rigmu, their noise, is disturbing the gods' sleep. But in the Hebrew Old Testament, it's about divine justice. It's a moral judgment on humanity's widespread sin and violence. So you have to ask, was the flood just a reaction from some cranky gods, or was it a judgment based on some kind of moral law? Gods versus humans. Who's responsible? This whole thing, a flood from noise versus a flood from sin, it brings us right to the core of the whole debate, the big question of responsibility. Who's actually to blame for all the death and suffering in the world? And this table here, it just lays it all out perfectly. Let's look at the ultimate divide. For the origin of death, the ancient Near East says it was part of creation, a divine decision. The Old Testament, a consequence of human choice. What about human nature? The ANE says we were created mortal and flawed to serve the gods. The OT, We were created with conditional immortality. And the divine character? In the A&E, the gods are often capricious and deceptive. In the OT, God is presented as just and gracious. And that brings us to the bottom line, responsibility. In the A&E stories, the gods are responsible for death. They made us this way. But in the Old Testament, humans are responsible. God made a good world, and we were the ones who brought death into it. The blame shifts completely.
Okay, so why these stories matter? You might be thinking, these are just ancient myths, right, from thousands of years ago. Why should I care? Well, because whether we know it or not, these stories have had a massive impact on the very foundations of how we think about the world.
I mean, look at the two legacies, the two worldviews they leave us with. The ancient Near Eastern worldview, it suggests a world that's governed by these powerful, totally unpredictable forces, where suffering can be completely random and arbitrary. But the Old Testament worldview, that suggests a world with an underlying moral order, where what we do, our actions, have deep and lasting consequences. These are two profoundly different ways to answer that huge question about suffering and evil.
And that really leaves us with a question to chew on, doesn't it? Are life's hardships the work of fickle, unpredictable forces? Or are they, at their core, the result of human choice? As you think about that, just remember that these ancient stories show us something powerful. How we answer that question doesn't just shape our ideas about death, it shapes everything about how we choose to live.